Deep within the sacred halls of the Vatican lies a secret, a truth so ancient and profound that it predates Christianity, outlasts the rise and fall of Rome, and stretches beyond the very foundations of Western religion. It is a secret etched into the very stones of its cathedrals, hidden in the elaborate symbols that adorn its architecture, whispered through the rituals performed by its highest priests. The Vatican, a bastion of spiritual authority, is not merely the seat of the Catholic Church. It is a monument to something far older, something buried beneath centuries of doctrine and faith. Its symbols, its traditions, and even its hierarchical structure bear striking resemblances to the ancient world, to the pantheon of gods worshipped in the distant past. These origins are not accidental, nor are they remnants of forgotten paganism. They are the echoes of a lost age, preserved in plain sight for those who dare to look. Long before the rise of monotheism, before the emergence of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, there was Sumer, the first great civilization of mankind, the cradle of human history. It was here, in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, that the earliest recorded gods ruled, the Anunnaki, celestial beings who descended from the heavens to shape the destiny of the world. Among them was Enki, the god of wisdom, knowledge, and creation, a figure of profound significance whose influence sculpted the foundations of civilization itself. Unlike his brother Enlil, who sought dominion through order and control, Enki was the bringer of enlightenment, the one who defied divine decree to uplift humanity, to bestow upon them the gifts of science, architecture, and spiritual awareness. The ancient Sumerians, who inscribed their knowledge onto clay tablets thousands of years before the birth of Christ, spoke of Enki's defiance, of his warnings of impending cataclysms, and of his role as the true benefactor of humankind. Yet, as empires rose and fell, as power shifted hands, the memory of Enki was slowly erased, his identity fragmented, his name absorbed into newer faiths under different guises. The knowledge he imparted, the sacred teachings of the past, were either destroyed or concealed, repackaged within the framework of emerging religions. The Vatican, as one of the most enduring religious institutions in history, contains symbols that bear striking resemblances to Mesopotamian iconography. The pine cone, the serpent, and winged figures, all of which have appeared in various ancient cultures, including Sumer, Egypt, and Rome. While these parallels are fascinating, whether they represent a direct preservation of Anunnaki knowledge or simply the natural evolution of shared human symbolism remains an open question. The towering pygmia, the grand pine cone statue in St. Peter's Square, represents the pineal gland, the ancient symbol of higher consciousness found in the hands of Anunnaki figures in Sumerian carvings. The serpent, an emblem of wisdom and transformation, woven into the very fabric of the Vatican's sacred art, is the same symbol long associated with Enki, the god of knowledge. Even the Pope's mitre, the distinctive headpiece of the Catholic Church, bears an uncanny resemblance to the fish-headed headdress worn by the priests of Dagon, a Mesopotamian deity linked to Enki himself. These are not coincidences, they are fragments of a deeper truth, an unbroken lineage of knowledge that transcends time, repurposed and safeguarded under new names. Though erased from official history, Enki's presence lingers, hidden beneath layers of religious dogma, woven into the very institutions that now claim dominion over the spiritual world. His wisdom, his defiance, his role as humanity's ancient guardian may have been obscured, but it was never truly lost. It remains, waiting to be rediscovered by those willing to see beyond the veil, to question the narratives written by victors, and to unveil the forgotten gods who once walked among men. As time marched forward and empires rose and fell, the memory of these ancient gods, once revered as the architects of civilization, became obscured beneath layers of new belief systems. The Anunnaki, who had once ruled the earth as divine overseers, were gradually relegated to myth, their presence diminished as new powers sought to reshape history in their own image. Enki, the wise and benevolent deity who brought knowledge to humanity, has a complex legacy. In Sumerian texts, he is often depicted as a protector and benefactor, sometimes opposing the harsh decrees of other gods to help mankind. However, as religious ideologies evolved, the concept of forbidden knowledge, once associated with divine enlightenment, became linked to deception. Some researchers speculate that Enki's role as the bringer of wisdom shares thematic similarities with the serpent in the Garden of Eden, who offers knowledge to Adam and Eve against divine command. Whether this represents an intentional transformation or simply a recurring mythological motif remains a subject of debate. This deliberate distortion of his identity can be traced through the scriptures of later civilizations, where the serpent, a universal symbol of wisdom in ancient cultures, was recast as an agent of corruption, most notably in the story of the Garden of Eden. The Sumerian accounts of Enki, which depict him as the great teacher of humanity, bear striking parallels to the biblical narrative of the serpent, who offers Adam and Eve the forbidden fruit of knowledge. Could it be that these two figures are one and the same? If so, then what else has been rewritten, repurposed, or buried in the annals of history? The process of erasing and rebranding the old gods was not an act of mere coincidence, but a deliberate effort by the ruling powers of each era to consolidate authority over the spiritual and intellectual landscape of their time. As the great civilizations of Mesopotamia crumbled, their religious traditions were not wholly discarded, but rather absorbed into the rising institutions of power, reshaped to fit the needs of those who sought dominion over the masses. The Babylonian priesthood, inheritors of the Sumerian traditions, refined these beliefs into complex systems of control, blending them into the framework of new empires. When the Roman Empire expanded its reach, it too absorbed these ancient mysteries, incorporating elements of Babylonian, Egyptian, and Greek spirituality into its own religious institutions. By the time Christianity emerged, the foundational beliefs of the ancient world had already been altered, encoded into new myths and hidden beneath a layer of monotheistic doctrine. The Vatican, which would later become the seat of Christian authority, inherited not just the faith of Christ, but the remnants of a far older, far more enigmatic system of belief, one that bore the fingerprints of the Anunnaki. This influence can be seen in the symbols, rituals, and architecture of the Catholic Church, which retain undeniable echoes of the lost Mesopotamian world. The towering Pygmia, the massive pine cone statue in the Vatican, is one of the most overt examples of this continuity. In Sumerian and Babylonian carvings, the pine cone is held in the hands of divine beings, representing the pineal gland, the third eye, the seat of higher consciousness, a concept deeply associated with Enki's gift of wisdom to mankind. This same motif appears repeatedly in Vatican iconography, subtly woven into the imagery of its grand halls. The Pope himself, the supreme authority of the Church, wears a mitre shaped like the head of a fish, an unmistakable parallel to the ceremonial headdresses of the priests of Dagon, the Mesopotamian fish god, whose origins are intertwined with those of Enki. Even the keys of the Vatican, the sacred emblem of papal authority, bear a striking resemblance to the ancient keys of Janus, the Roman god of doorways and transitions, a deity whose worship can be traced back to the rites of Babylon. These parallels are not mere coincidence. They are remnants of an ancient lineage, fragments of a forgotten past that have been repurposed and preserved under new names. The transition from ancient polytheistic traditions to monotheistic faiths was not an abrupt replacement, but rather a gradual process of adaptation. Elements of earlier belief systems, including Mesopotamian religious traditions, found their way into later theological frameworks. While the Anunnaki were no longer openly worshipped, echoes of their myths, symbols, and cosmology persisted, influencing the development of later religious structures. Whether this represents a deliberate preservation or a natural evolution of spiritual thought remains a compelling mystery. The Vatican, in its grandeur and mystery, stands as a living relic of this hidden history, a monument built upon the sacred knowledge of civilizations long past. Yet, for all the efforts to conceal and restructure these truths, echoes of the old world persist. The Bible, despite its revisions and adaptations, still contains traces of the Anunnaki narrative. The book of Genesis, for example, describes the Nephilim, the sons of God who came down and took the daughters of men as wives, a passage that bears a haunting resemblance to the Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki's interaction with humanity. The flood myth, central to the story of Noah, is nearly identical to the tale of Ziusudra, the Sumerian hero warned by Enki of a great deluge, who was instructed to build a vessel to preserve life. These stories, passed down and reshaped through generations, remain a hidden testament to the survival of the old gods, their presence obscured but never truly erased. Perhaps the greatest deception is not in what has been told, but in what has been omitted, rewritten, and deliberately concealed. The Vatican, with its vast archives, its secret chambers, and its immense influence over history, may hold within its walls the key to unlocking the suppressed truths of our past. What if the real history of humanity is far older, far more complex than we have been led to believe? What if the gods of the ancient world were not merely figments of mythology, but tangible beings whose influence still lingers beneath the surface of modern institutions? Enki's wisdom, once shared freely with mankind, was buried beneath layers of doctrine, yet it has never been completely silenced. The symbols remain, the echoes persist, and the truth, for those willing to seek it, waits patiently to be uncovered. Though Christianity outwardly distances itself from the pagan traditions of antiquity, the undeniable presence of Mesopotamian symbolism within the Vatican raises unsettling questions. These ancient motifs, far from being remnants of forgotten cultures, have been subtly woven into the very fabric of the Church's architecture, rituals, and iconography. The presence of Anunnaki symbolism within the Vatican is not mere coincidence. It is a legacy, a concealed truth that has persisted through millennia. The pine cone, prominently displayed in the court of the pine cone, is perhaps the most striking relic of this ancient connection. To the untrained eye, it may seem an ornamental oddity, yet its significance runs far deeper. In Mesopotamian carvings, divine beings, often believed to represent the Anunnaki, are shown holding pine cones, extending them toward what appears to be the tree of life. In Sumerian tradition, the pine cone symbolized the pineal gland, often referred to as the third eye, the seat of spiritual awakening and higher consciousness. This gland, deeply revered in mystical traditions, was believed to be the key to unlocking divine knowledge, a gateway to deeper understanding. That the Vatican would prominently feature such an object, one so intimately tied to the esoteric wisdom of Enki and the lost gods of Sumer, suggests a deliberate preservation of ancient knowledge, hidden in plain sight. But the pine cone is far from the only lingering trace of the Anunnaki within the Vatican's walls. The serpent, a symbol both feared and revered throughout history, is another glaring connection. In Christian doctrine, the serpent is cast as the deceiver, the tempter in the Garden of Eden who led humanity to sin. Yet, in the deeper roots of Mesopotamian tradition, the serpent was something entirely different. In Sumerian mythology, Enki, the god of wisdom, knowledge, and creation, was represented as the serpent. He was the bringer of enlightenment, the one who defied the divine decree to empower mankind with knowledge, just as the biblical serpent offered the forbidden fruit of understanding to Adam and Eve. This parallel is too significant to ignore. Was Enki's role as the great benefactor of humanity deliberately inverted in later religious narratives? If the Serpent of Eden was, in fact, a distortion of Enki's original mythos, then Christianity's entire foundation is built upon a misunderstood legacy, one that vilifies the very being who once sought to elevate humanity. This leads to yet another unsettling connection: the winged beings found within the artwork and sculptures of the Vatican. In Christian tradition, these figures are identified as angels, divine messengers of God. Yet their appearance bears an uncanny resemblance to the Anunnaki depictions in Mesopotamian carvings. In ancient Sumer, the Anunnaki were frequently depicted as tall, humanoid figures with elaborate garments and wings, signifying their celestial origins. They were believed to have descended from the heavens to rule over mankind, shaping early civilization and bestowing knowledge upon humanity. These descriptions align remarkably with the biblical portrayal of angels, beings sent from the divine realm to oversee and interact with humanity. If the Anunnaki and the angels of Christian lore are one and the same, then what does that reveal about the true origins of the Vatican's religious framework? Could it be that the early church did not erase the gods of Mesopotamia, but rather repurposed them, transforming them into figures that fit within the new monotheistic narrative? These symbols, the pine cone, the serpent, the winged beings, are not isolated occurrences, but pieces of a larger, far more intricate puzzle. They point toward an undeniable connection between the Vatican and the ancient Anunnaki pantheon, a connection that challenges everything we think we know about the evolution of religious institutions. If these symbols were truly remnants of discarded pagan traditions, why have they been so carefully preserved? Why do they continue to hold such a central place in the Vatican's design and theology? The answer may lie within the very foundation of the Church itself. When Rome transitioned from a pagan empire to a Christian stronghold, it did not completely discard the religious traditions of the civilizations it absorbed. Instead, it adopted, adapted, and concealed. The mystery religions of Babylon, Egypt, and Greece were integrated into the new faith, their gods reborn under different names, their symbols given new meanings. The Vatican became the custodian of this knowledge, shaping doctrine not as a means of enlightenment, but as a tool of control. The Anunnaki, once openly worshipped as divine rulers, were transformed into figures that served the evolving narrative of power. Some cast as angels, others demonized, and their wisdom restricted to only those deemed worthy to possess it. Even the papal authority itself mirrors the structure of ancient Mesopotamian priest-kings. The title Pontifex Maximus, now associated with the Pope, was once the title of the highest priest in Rome, an office that can be traced back to the Babylonian mystery cults. The Pope's elaborate ceremonial headdress bears an eerie resemblance to the fish-shaped mitre worn by the priests of Dagon, a deity directly connected to Enki. The keys of the Vatican, often depicted in papal regalia, closely resemble the symbolic keys held by Janus, the two-faced Roman god of gateways, a figure whose origins lie in even older Mesopotamian traditions. These are not accidental similarities. They are the remnants of a priesthood that has existed for thousands of years, predating Christianity itself. If the Vatican is indeed the inheritor of an ancient Anunnaki tradition, what implications does this hold for modern faith? What knowledge remains hidden within its vast archives, locked away from the public eye? The Vatican's secret archives, one of the most restricted repositories of knowledge in the world, is rumored to contain records that could rewrite human history. Documents that reveal the true origins of civilization, the suppressed teachings of the ancient gods, and perhaps even the real identity of the beings who once walked among men. The Church, for centuries, has carefully curated what is known and what is forgotten, deciding what history is remembered and what is left to fade into obscurity. Yet, despite all efforts to suppress it, the past has a way of revealing itself. The symbols endure, their meaning waiting to be rediscovered. The pine cone, the serpent, the winged gods, these are not just remnants of a lost past. They are clues to an ancient reality, a lineage of divine rulers whose influence never truly disappeared. The question is no longer whether the Vatican has preserved the knowledge of the Anunnaki. It is whether the time has come for this knowledge to be unveiled. As humanity advances, as we rediscover our past and reclaim the wisdom that was once freely given, perhaps the greatest revelation of all still lies ahead. The revelation that the gods of old were never truly gone. They were merely hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to remember. Throughout history, the image of the Divine Mother and Child has remained one of the most enduring and powerful archetypes in religious tradition, transcending cultures, empires, and epochs. The portrayal of Mary and Jesus as the Sacred Mother and Child is but the latest iteration of a motif that dates back thousands of years, originating in the mythologies of Sumer, Babylon, and Egypt. In the ancient world, the worship of the Mother Goddess was deeply ingrained in society, symbolizing fertility, creation, protection, and divine wisdom. Long before Mary was venerated as the Mother of God, the Sumerians worshipped Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, a deity associated with love, war, and divine authority. Inanna was often depicted cradling her divine son, Tammuz, a god of renewal and rebirth, whose life cycle mirrored the changing seasons. The Babylonians later absorbed this tradition, revering Ishtar, a direct descendant of Inanna's mythos, who also held her son in sacred imagery. Similarly, the Egyptians worshipped Isis, the devoted mother of Horus, a god whose story bears striking resemblances to the later narrative of Christ, a divine son born of a sacred mother, destined to fulfill a higher cosmic purpose. Even in Greece and Rome, the tradition endured. Aphrodite and Eros, Demeter and Persephone, Cybele and Attis, all variations of the Divine Mother and Child, carrying forward the ancient belief that the feminine force was the giver of life and the protector of sacred knowledge. When Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, the Church faced a monumental challenge: how to convert the pagan masses without completely erasing their deeply rooted traditions. The answer lay in adapting and reinterpreting existing religious symbols rather than destroying them. Thus, the worship of the Mother Goddess was not eradicated, but rather transformed, repurposed into the veneration of Mary, the Virgin Mother of Christ. Though her name changed, her role, her symbolism, and her imagery remained almost identical to those of the goddesses that came before her. The haloed depictions of Mary holding baby Jesus mirror the ancient statues of Isis and Horus, the soft gaze of the Divine Mother reflecting the same maternal reverence that once belonged to the queens of heaven before her. But this transition was more than just a theological adaptation. It was a carefully orchestrated act of religious continuity, ensuring that the ancient veneration of the feminine divine remained intact, albeit under a new name. The Vatican absorbed these traditions, weaving them into Christian doctrine, ensuring that the worship of the Divine Mother persisted, though veiled beneath the guise of Christian monotheism. Yet, hidden within the folds of history, lies an unsettling truth. Was Mary ever meant to be worshipped at all? The early Christian Church, particularly in its formative years, made no mention of Marian veneration. The apostles themselves did not elevate Mary to the status of divine intercessor. This development came much later, emerging only after the absorption of pagan traditions. Could it be that the Vatican, rather than eliminating the worship of the Mother Goddess, merely reshaped it into a new, more acceptable form? And if so, what other ancient traditions lie hidden within the sacred halls of the Church, waiting to be rediscovered? The hierarchical structure of the Vatican, often seen as the heart of Christian authority, is not rooted in the teachings of Christ, but rather in an ancient system of priest kingship that dates back to the dawn of civilization in Mesopotamia. Long before the rise of the Catholic Church, the world's first organized religions were established in Sumer, Babylon, and Assyria, where rulers did not merely govern as kings, they ruled as divine intermediaries, wielding both political and spiritual power. These early civilizations developed a priestly hierarchy, an elite class of spiritual leaders who claimed direct communion with the gods, dictating laws, orchestrating rituals, and ensuring the control of divine knowledge over the masses. As history progressed and empires rose and fell, this structure was not abandoned, it was inherited. The very title Pontifex Maximus, now associated with the Pope, was not originally a Christian designation at all. It was the title used by the high priests of Rome, who, in turn, had inherited it from the mystery religions of Babylon. This priesthood was far older than Christianity itself, dating back to the cults of Enlil, Enki, and the celestial deities of Mesopotamia. When Rome transitioned from a pagan empire to a Christian stronghold, it did not abolish this power structure. It absorbed and transformed it, veiling ancient traditions beneath a new theological framework. Even the papal regalia, revered as sacred attire, betrays its ancient origins. The Pope's mitre, shaped like the head of a fish, is nearly identical to the headdress worn by the priests of Dagon, the Mesopotamian fish god, a deity closely associated with Enki, the bringer of knowledge and wisdom. The resemblance is undeniable. In Sumerian and Akkadian reliefs, priests of Dagon are depicted wearing fish-shaped ceremonial garments, signifying their status as intercessors between the heavens and the earthly realm. The adoption of the same headdress by the highest figure in Christianity raises unsettling questions. Was this symbolism carried forward as a deliberate preservation of Mesopotamian religious authority, masked beneath Christian tradition? But perhaps the most telling relic of this ancient priesthood lies within the Vatican's most sacred symbol, the keys of heaven. The Vatican asserts that these keys, often depicted in papal insignia, represent the authority given to St. Peter by Christ, granting him dominion over spiritual salvation. However, this explanation disregards the striking similarities between the Vatican's keys and the sacred keys of Janus and Ceres, deities worshipped in Rome long before Christianity. Janus, the two-faced god of doorways, transitions, and secret knowledge, was believed to hold the keys to the mysteries of the divine, just as the Anunnaki were said to hold the secrets of creation itself. The continuity of this symbolism suggests that the papal institution is not merely a Christian authority, but a modern incarnation of an ancient priesthood, one that has ruled humanity for thousands of years. Beneath the veneer of faith and doctrine, the Vatican remains a guardian of forgotten truths, a stronghold of power inherited from a civilization that predates recorded history. The question remains, what knowledge has been preserved, and what secrets remain locked behind the gates of the world's most enigmatic institution? Beneath the towering halls of the Vatican, beyond public access, lies one of the most restricted archives in the world, a repository of centuries of church records, correspondence, and historical documents. Some believe these archives may contain suppressed knowledge, including ancient texts that challenge mainstream narratives of religious history. Though there is no confirmed evidence that the Vatican holds records of Anunnaki influence, the secrecy surrounding certain documents continues to fuel speculation about what truths remain hidden from public view. For centuries, the Vatican's secret archives have been shrouded in mystery, protected behind layers of bureaucracy, hidden beneath miles of catacombs, and accessible only to a select few within the highest ranks of the Church. What lies within these archives? Could they contain the suppressed truths of the ancient world, buried deliberately to preserve the Vatican's authority? It is whispered that these documents hold evidence of the Anunnaki's influence on early religious systems, detailing how the gods of Mesopotamia were not mere myths, but tangible rulers who shaped humanity's spiritual path. If such records exist, they would confirm that the stories of Genesis, the Nephilim, and the fallen angels were not simply allegories, but remnants of an older narrative, one that predated and influenced Christianity itself. These archives may also contain hidden scriptures and alternative gospels, texts that contradict the official version of history as presented by the Church, detailing a vastly different account of Christ's teachings and the true origins of Christian doctrine. What if Jesus' message was altered, reshaped to fit a specific agenda, while his real teachings, perhaps linked to esoteric knowledge and lost spiritual wisdom, were buried beneath layers of dogma? But the mysteries do not end there. Some believe the archives conceal knowledge about the pineal gland, often referred to as the third eye, a biological gateway to higher consciousness that ancient civilizations revered as the seat of divine connection. In nearly every advanced culture, from Sumer and Egypt to India and Mesoamerica, the pineal gland was seen as the key to unlocking hidden realms of perception, an organ capable of connecting humanity to a greater cosmic intelligence. The presence of the pinecone symbol in the Vatican, a motif also found in Mesopotamian carvings, suggests an enduring fascination with the concept of spiritual awakening. Throughout history, the pinecone has been associated with enlightenment, divine knowledge, and the human connection to higher realms. While some theorists speculate that institutions like the Vatican may have deeper knowledge of these mysteries, no definitive evidence confirms an intentional effort to suppress such knowledge. The question remains, does this symbol represent an ancient truth, hidden in plain sight, or is it simply a recurring motif across civilizations? If humanity were to awaken to its full spiritual potential, the structures of control that have governed civilization for millennia could crumble overnight. This may explain why the Church, throughout history, has been obsessed with maintaining strict control over religious teachings, banning certain books, executing heretics, and labeling alternative spiritual practices as blasphemy. What secrets would be revealed if the Vatican archives were fully open to the world? Would we discover that humanity's past is far older and more complex than we have been told? That the gods of antiquity never truly left, but were merely rebranded? Or that the very nature of divinity itself has been misrepresented, hidden away beneath centuries of deception? The truth remains locked behind the Vatican's gates, waiting for the day when the veil is finally lifted and history is rewritten with the knowledge that was never meant to be lost. Though the names of the Anunnaki have faded from the records of history, their influence was never truly erased. It was absorbed, repurposed, and hidden beneath new doctrines. As Rome expanded its empire, it did not destroy the gods of Babylon, Egypt, or Greece. Instead, it assimilated them, weaving their symbols, rituals, and hierarchies into its own system of governance. When Christianity emerged, the process of religious transformation accelerated, but it was not a complete departure from the past. It was a calculated evolution. The mystery religions of the ancient world, once exclusive to the high priests and initiates of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Persia, were gradually merged with Christian theology, ensuring that the structures of spiritual authority remained intact. The Vatican became the guardian of these ancient traditions, shaping Christianity not as a faith of spiritual liberation, but as a mechanism of control. The original teachings of enlightenment, divine consciousness, and the inner divinity of mankind, once central to the wisdom of the ancient priesthoods, were methodically stripped away, replaced with doctrines that emphasized obedience, submission, and the necessity of an external intermediary between humanity and the divine. In this transition, the old gods were not forgotten, only rebranded. Enki, the giver of knowledge, became the Serpent of Eden, his wisdom recast as deception. The divine feminine, once revered in the form of Inanna, Isis, and Cybele, was absorbed into the figure of the Virgin Mary, her celestial power veiled under a new identity. Even the hierarchical structure of the Mesopotamian priest-kings, the divine rulers who claimed authority by decree of the gods, was preserved within the very fabric of the papal system. The Pope, the cardinals, and the Vatican elite function as the modern successors to the high priests of Sumer and Babylon, continuing the same systems of spiritual governance that have ruled mankind for millennia. This was not a coincidence. It was an intentional continuation of an ancient order, masked behind a new theological framework. Symbols that once belonged to the Anunnaki pantheon still remain, hidden in plain sight. The pine cone, symbolizing the activation of the pineal gland, the third eye of spiritual awakening, stands prominently in Vatican courtyards. The serpent, long associated with Enki's wisdom, appears in Vatican imagery, its true meaning obscured by layers of demonization. The winged beings of Mesopotamia, once carved onto Sumerian temple walls, now exist in Christian art as angels, their original identities forgotten but their presence preserved. These remnants serve as clues to a deeper truth, that the Anunnaki's influence never truly ended, but was hidden beneath layers of doctrine and religious reinvention. The gods of the ancient world did not disappear. They were absorbed, transformed, and concealed behind new names and symbols. Their wisdom, once openly shared, became restricted knowledge, hoarded by an elite class that used it not to enlighten, but to control. And so, humanity was led away from the truth, that divinity was never meant to be confined within temples or dictated by priests, but was always a force within, waiting to be reclaimed. The past is not gone. It lingers beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to question, to seek, and to remember what was never truly lost. The Vatican is more than just the seat of Christian authority. It is a monument to a forgotten past, a structure built upon the remnants of an ancient order that predates Christianity itself. Beneath its grand cathedrals and towering obelisks, beneath the rituals and sacred processions, lies a legacy far older than the Church, a hidden connection to Sumer, Babylon, and the long-lost gods of Mesopotamia. The symbols that adorn the Vatican's architecture bear the unmistakable imprint of the ancient world. The pine cone of spiritual awakening, the serpent of hidden knowledge, the winged beings that once ruled from the heavens. Its priesthood, with its elaborate robes, mitres, and hierarchical structure, mirrors the traditions of Sumerian high priests, the very same figures who once served the Anunnaki pantheon. Even the very concept of divine authority, centralized within the figure of the Pope, reflects the priest-kings of Mesopotamia, rulers who governed in the name of celestial deities. The truth was never destroyed. It was simply repackaged, concealed beneath layers of religious doctrine, hidden not in darkness, but in plain sight. The gods of antiquity, once openly worshipped as the architects of civilization, were not erased but transformed. Their teachings, once available to those who sought enlightenment, were restricted, classified, and guarded within the halls of power. Yet their influence lingers, woven into the fabric of modern institutions, embedded within the very doctrines that shape the world today. The Vatican does not merely preserve faith, It safeguards a secret far greater than any religion. A secret that whispers of a time when gods walked among men, when knowledge was power, and when the past was not something to be forgotten, but something waiting to be remembered.